The cold didn't just freeze my skin, it seeped straight into my bones, numbing the absolute disbelief shattering my heart. One minute, I was standing in our warm, softly lit living room, and the next, the heavy oak door slammed shut in my face, locking me out in a raging blizzard. I fell back into a snowbank, gasping for air as the freezing wind whipped around me. Through the frost-covered window, I could see my husband, David, walking away without a single backward glance. Beside him stood his 17-year-old son, Julian, wearing a mask of fake terror that slowly melted into a triumphant, chilling smile. Julian had finally won. He had spent 2 years spinning a web of toxic lies to convince his father that I was a monster. And David believed him. But as I sat shivering in the snow, the shock died, and pure survival took over. David thought he was discarding me. He had no idea what happened next. My name is Elena, and at 32 years old, I learned exactly how fast a life you spent years building can freeze to death. Lying there in the drifting snow, the sub-zero wind felt like needles against my face, but the real numbness was spreading inside my chest. Just minutes ago, I had a home, a marriage, and a future. Now, I was staring at the heavy oak front door of the house I had spent the last 2 years turning into a sanctuary. David, my husband, had looked at me with a hatred so pure it made my blood run colder than the blizzard around us. He didn't care that I was wearing nothing but a light sweater. He didn't care that the roads were completely impassable. He only cared about the toxic, venomous whispers of his 17-year-old son, Julian. I had sacrificed my independent life, my beautiful downtown apartment, and my own peace of mind to become a supportive stepmother to a boy who had spent every waking single second plotting my absolute ruin. And in the end, Julian's final, masterful lie had worked flawlessly. David had completely broken, choosing his son's fabricated reality over my innocence. When I first married David, I genuinely believed I could help heal his fractured family. Julian's mother had passed away 4 years prior, and David was drowning in paternal guilt. But the moment I unpacked my boxes, the psychological warfare began. To David, Julian was the grieving, perfect angel who just needed time. To me, he was a calculated master of manipulation. It started small. Julian would intentionally ruin his late mother's porcelain heirlooms when David was at work, smashing them on the kitchen floor, only to sob hysterically when his father walked through the door, claiming I had thrown them in a fit of cleaning rage. I tried to defend myself, but David's grief blinded him. Then came the financial setup. Julian stole $500 from David's dresser, a cash stack meant for the contractor, and hid the crisp bills deep inside my favorite everyday designer purse. When David confronted me, demanding to know why I needed to steal from him, I was utterly defenseless. Every single interaction became a trap. Julian engineered constant, agonizing friction, muttering vile insults to me in the hallways, only to instantly switch to a trembling, victimized tone the very second David entered the room. He was chipping away at my husband's trust, piece by piece, day by day, systematically turning my own home into a hostile courtroom where I was always presumed guilty without a trial. The nightmare reached its breaking point on that final, freezing Tuesday evening. David was late coming home from a high-stakes corporate meeting, delayed by the blinding snowstorm building outside. Julian knew it was the perfect storm. The second he heard David's tires crunching on the icy driveway, the trap sprung. Julian grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the entryway table and violently smashed it against the brick fireplace, sending shards of glass flying across the hardwood floor. Before I could even process the explosion of sound, he grabbed his own arm, squeezing it so hard his knuckles turned white, deliberately leaving deep, angry red welts on his skin. He ripped his own shirt collar and began screaming at the top of his lungs, a terrifying sound of simulated agony. When David burst through the door, panic-stricken, Julian fell to his knees, sobbing hysterically and pointing a trembling finger at me. "She snapped, Dad. She said she was sick of me and attacked me." David took one look at his crying, bruised son and the shattered glass, and his sanity completely shattered. He refused to listen to my desperate pleas, his eyes burning with blind, paternal rage. He grabbed my arm, dragging me toward the front door, as I begged him to look at the truth. He threw me out into the sub-zero blizzard, locking the heavy deadbolt behind me. The freezing wind howled through the trees, snapping me out of my paralyzing shock. I knew that if I stayed on that porch begging a man who had completely abandoned me, the cold would take me before morning. My pride died right there in the snowbank, replaced by a fierce, driving survival instinct. I dragged my shivering body across the icy yard, stumbling through the deep drifts toward the old detached garage at the edge of the property. My fingers were so stiff I could barely move them, but I managed to retrieve the spare emergency key hidden inside the hollow plastic rock near the side entrance. I slipped inside the dark, unheated structure, collapsing onto a pile of greasy moving blankets to shield myself from the biting draft. Wrapped in the heavy canvas, my trembling hand reached deep into my coat pocket. My phone was still there, the battery hovering at 40%. As the initial panic subsided, a strange, crystalline clarity washed over me. I wiped the tears from my eyes and stared at the glowing screen. David had forgotten one crucial detail when he threw me out. I was the one who personally set up and managed our entire smart home security ecosystem. Sitting in the freezing dark of the garage, my breath billowing in white clouds, I opened the encrypted smart home app on my phone. Months ago, after Julian had framed me for stealing that cash, I had quietly installed 2 hidden, motion-activated nanny cams disguised as USB wall chargers, one in the living room and one in the main entryway. I needed peace of mind, but now they were my only lifeline. With shaking fingers, I bypassed the main hub and pulled up the cloud storage logs from earlier that evening. I clicked the time stamp marked 5:45 p.m., right before David arrived. The video buffered for an agonizing second, and then the absolute, undeniable truth filled my screen. There was Julian standing alone in the living room. The footage caught every single detail with terrifying clarity, him calmly smashing the crystal vase against the fireplace, laughing out loud as he deliberately dug his own fingernails into his forearm to create the fake bruises, and then practicing his hysterical, victimized crying in front of the hallway mirror. He was a monster, caught in full high definition. I immediately downloaded the unedited, raw video files directly to my phone's local drive, making sure the digital timestamps were permanently locked in. Instead of confronting David directly, I let the digital truth do the fighting for me. With a few deliberate taps on my freezing screen, I selected the downloaded video files. I didn't just text them to David. I sent them directly to the Human Resources Department and the managing partners at his conservative corporate law firm, where reputation and ethics meant everything. Finally, I forwarded the footage to the local police non-emergency line, reporting domestic endangerment and filing a formal complaint. Less than 5 minutes later, the floodlights at the main house violently cut through the falling snow. The front door flew open, and David burst out into the raging blizzard, his phone clutched tightly in his hand. His face was completely pale, drained of all color, his eyes wide with a sickening mixture of horror, shame, and absolute remorse. He had just watched his golden son practice his fake tears on camera. He started screaming my name into the wind, stumbling through the snowbanks toward the garage, realizing the catastrophic magnitude of his mistake. But the game was already over. As he reached the garage door, the rhythmic red and blue lights of 2 police cruisers began flashing down the driveway. I refused to step back inside that house. I walked straight past David's pathetic, tearful apologies and climbed into the warmth of the police cruiser, leaving him standing alone in the storm he had created. I filed for divorce the very next morning. With the undeniable video evidence of domestic endangerment and financial fraud, my attorney secured an incredibly swift, massive settlement that gave me complete financial independence. Today, I am living back in a beautiful downtown condo, completely healed, happy, and free. David was fired from his firm due to the massive reputational scandal, and he is now trapped, broke, and ruined in that empty house with a toxic son who successfully destroyed his life. He chose the lie, and now he has to live in it.